When I finally settled in the UK, the next phase was to plan for my retirement. And the retirement plan was also around the kids. So I had this vision that when I retire, I'm going to have a house. The house needs to have 5 bedrooms because I have 5 kids. It was pretty much everything around the kids. But as time went on, I realized that idea was wrong, because when my children started going to university and occasionally we had conversations, I suddenly realized that the idea of planning retirement around the children is absolute nonsense. And I'll tell you why. You see, with my firstborn, he's studying astrophysics. He's talking about, I'm thinking of working in America. Or sometimes you'd say, there might be opportunities in Europe, and there are also opportunities in Kenya. Sometimes there's opportunities in Africa. And my second born, he's starting to be an architect. He's also talking about, I'd prefer to live in the Middle East. And I'm like, oh my goodness. And then my other son, he's also talking about, I want to live in a country where there are no taxes, and I like the architecture and the culture of Dubai. And I was like, wow. So where does that leave that 5-bedroom house? First of all, it's very expensive to build that house, and yet you're building it around the children that also have their own life. And that is the big mistake. And to make matters worse, you, or rather in this case, me, I grew up with this idea that, Zimbabwe is beautiful. I love Zimbabwe. I reminisce about how we grew up, how we went to school, the greenery, the food and everything. But my children were born here. They don't experience that. They don't even, when they go to Zimbabwe, yes, it's a holiday and they see a few relatives here and there, but it doesn't mean that they love that. No, majority of what they know and what they've experienced is in the diaspora. So to think that, I'm going to build a house and they're going to be there and so on. No, they have their own lives. They're going to get married. They're going to have their own children, and pretty much they're gone. So where does that leave us as the parents? Well, you realize that this is where you have to plan things very, very carefully, because you are going to be lonely if you're not careful. And the reason why you'll be lonely if you're not careful is because in the UK, or in the West rather, they have their own system. And this system is based on keeping everyone on survival mode, basically. If you try to be in the upper middle class or top classes, there's crazy barriers there. You don't just go into those brackets. So majority of people, they want to keep them at middle class level. So if you are in the West and you've made it to middle class, you'll get a round of applause, because basically you've made it, middle class. But beyond that is very, 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 very difficult. But what happens now with that middle class level is, as things change, as the economy changes, as the inflation goes higher, and as bills go higher, majority of people that are affected are the middle class, right? The other guys above, they have it sorted because they have investments, they have assets, they have all sorts of things, right? So the middle class are the guys that have mortgages, they have car finance, and have plenty of credit cards. That's where they are. But you see, this is not sustainable when you decide to retire. Because when you retire, you get a pension, and that's what you survive on. And that pension is fixed. And that's it. Unless, of course, and I'm just speaking in general, unless, of course, you're so creative that you've got all these other sources of income that you've created. But then again, in the UK, it's very, very difficult to have those other sources of income. I mean, later on, even setting up a business here is very, very, very difficult, because majority of what you're trying to introduce has already been started. It has already been done. So what you'll find is majority of Zimbabweans who set up businesses, especially in the UK, it's around nursing. It's around healthcare, because that's the area where there's demand. Try setting up a restaurant. Try setting up any other brick and mortar business and see how difficult that is. It is almost impossible, right? And not only that, you're also competing with other people. And you also have to be part of a community if you're going to be having customers that are coming on an ongoing basis. So now you're competing with these massive companies that have budgets, that have crazy budgets of marketing. So setting up a business or having a business in retirement, let's just scrap that. That's not going to happen. Okay. So now you're left with a fixed income. And this fixed income, as things fluctuate, the inflation and the prices go up and down, you're affected big time. So there you are. You've got your house. Maybe perhaps you finished paying your mortgage. But now the question is, okay, community. Do you have a community? Now, I know it sounds like, well, who cares about the community? I'm in my retirement. But when I was in Zimbabwe for 3 years, it was so fascinating because although I didn't have a lot of money, because most of my money went to the farming projects, just having people around you that care, to me, that was a big deal. It was a big deal. I experienced this firsthand. First, when my young brother's kids passed on, the whole community came. The whole community came. I'm talking about people from the rural areas, relatives, friends, people I had seen like 25 years ago. I started seeing them and I'm like, oh my goodness. Oh, do you remember me? And this was when we were very, very young, but they all came through. That you'll never get when you're in the diaspora. This community idea was so crazy that sometimes, because, I have an online business, so at times I work very, very late and I'd wake up, late. So I used to get these young guys who would come and knock on my bedroom window and sometimes knock on the gate to wake me up. And I used to be very annoyed. But as I was speaking to one or two guys, they said, no, you know what? The reason why these youngsters or these guys are waking you up is because you live by yourself and they're just checking up on you just in case something happens. You could just die while you're by yourself. So that's the way of showing that they care. And this is the other side. I wasn't used to this at all. Sometimes in the diaspora, you live in a street where even they have these union flags. You can have racists in your own street. That's how crazy it is. But over there in Zimbabwe, yes, we talk about, okay, we're being scammed. Business is almost impossible. There's potholes. The government this. Yeah, we talk about all of that. But in the end, overall, in retirement, I think that in itself is huge because community is one of the most important things, especially at old age. And who doesn't want to be amongst, people that they can relate to at that age? Because just being lonely, especially in the diaspora, is not easy. And then I know sometimes we think that, okay, if I pass on, I'll leave the house to my children. Transferring that house to your child, it's not easy, especially when the government has to take 40% of the inheritance tax. Of course, if you hit the thresholds, okay? You have to hit the thresholds of how much the house is worth, and then they take their 40% if you meet that threshold. But my point is to transfer that house into your son's name or your daughter's name requires a lot of money. So they have to borrow. And besides, if they can't pay the money to keep the house, then the house has to be sold. Imagine that. Now, let's say you're in a situation where you have a terminal illness. Sometimes you have to sell the house. So all these are situations which are very, very, very scary, especially retirement in the diaspora. So these relationships that I'm talking about and the sense of belonging, I think as you get older, it becomes a priority. Of course, this message is not for those who are in their 20s or maybe even early 30s, because you're not thinking about that. But these are the sort of things where you have to think about, because I went through those phases. The first chapter, when I came over here, I was all over the place, buying nice clothes, expensive clothes, trying to look nice. And then you realize, okay, this fashion thing, we're chasing it, but it's almost like you're chasing your tail. It never ends, because you buy this this year, next year they have a better version of that. And later on, if it's technology, the technology has improved. So what do? You keep chasing it. So that doesn't work. So as you get older now, this is where you start thinking, okay, so what am I going to do in my old age? Am I going to retire? What am I going to do? And those questions are very, very serious, because they determine where you're going to be. So the challenge that we get now is the community in the diaspora, especially if you join the wrong community, it becomes a community of people who are doing a similar thing, right? Yesterday I did a video about the different types of diasporans. If you listen to that, you'll see that you can easily be in a group of diasporans who, if they are those complainers and the ones with the victim mentality, then you're stuck because you don't grow. You also start singing their songs, and that can be very dangerous. And before you know it, you've lived in the diaspora for 40 years, 50 years. So it is very, very, very important to start looking at all the possibilities. Now, for me, when that realization came, I started looking at how I'm going to sustain myself wherever I am, and not think about the children. Yes, they can visit me. Yes, I may want to see yes, I want to see my grandchildren and all of that. But it's me first. These guys, my sons, they're on their own. They're going to have their own children. They're going to have their own wives. And pretty much I have no say in that. But the only challenge is we as Zimbabweans, we look at our culture and think that it's going to be applied to our children. Right now, even if you look, there are children who don't even want to have anything to do with Zimbabwe, because they see it just like any other Westerner would see it. It's too dirty, it's backward, they don't like it. But of course, because it's your home, you love it. We all talk about Kumusha, we're going to go to the rural areas and so on. Yes, it's amazing for us, but for our kids, maybe they just want to be there for 1 or 2 days and that's it. But to live there, hell no, not going to happen, because you want to retire with them. That's where the problem is. But they're grown. So I think we have to realize that it is a massive move for us to just think about ourselves, because it may sound like it is very detrimental and it's not a good way of thinking, but this is how, and this is the reality of how things are going to be. Now, the challenge is when you now decide, okay, fine, I want to move back home and retire in Zimbabwe. The panic creeps in, because as Zimbabweans, because we mirror our lifestyle based on the West. We look at the Americans, we look at the British. Those are the people we look up to, for measuring how well we are doing. And this comes with a disease called the competition syndrome. So you want to compete now. So that force or that syndrome is very powerful, because it's going to stop you from progressing. So you'll find that, how can I make it? Ruwa Organic has a farm, Ruwa Organic has a house, he has a car. By the time I start, I won't even make it. You see, that in itself will suck the energy out of you, because that competition syndrome is very, very dangerous, and it stops a lot of people from moving forward. So ideally, what you want to do is to cure that disease. You need to cure that disease of competing and learn to walk in your own lane, or stay in your own lane. Do what you can with what you have. Because again, I'll refer to the video I talked about, I created yesterday. It is very difficult for you to want to compare, because maybe you've made crazy financial decisions that have affected 20 years of your life, and maybe I didn't. So how are you going to compare? You can't compare, because we all are working from a different blueprint. So maybe the financial decisions that you've made 5 years ago impacts you on how you're going to get on with things when you go to Zimbabwe. Do you see what I mean? So you have to take away the competition thing and stop comparing yourself, because you don't know what financial decisions others made. Maybe the person that you're comparing yourself with has invested. They have stocks, and those stocks have yielded in a very positive way, but you haven't. Maybe my business is a breakthrough, but you don't have a business. So how are you going to compare yourself with me, or compare yourself with the next person? Maybe the other person has been saving money since they came to the diaspora. For the past 20 years, they've been saving. I was actually shocked. There's a guy who told me that he was thinking of buying a farm. I think I've mentioned this before. He had £500,000. I was shocked. I'm like, oh my goodness, £500,000. and ready to buy a farm in Zimbabwe. 500,000, a young man in the UK. He was asking me for advice. 500,000. This is something that I would even go as far as saying 99.9% of us don't have, because majority, we are in debt. We're in debt. So this is very, very, very important that you stay in your own lane. You work with what you have. In Zimbabwe, and I noticed this, by the way, the first few months, 2 to 3 months, where if people know you're coming from the diaspora, yeah, they're excited to see what you have. But if you are down to earth, you're easygoing, yes, people will start saying, yeah, he's broke, he doesn't have money. These are those people in the diaspora that don't have money. If you can ride that wave and just maintain your pace and not get affected or annoyed by those statements, and not get affected by you being compared with others that have done wonders and they've done. If you can get past that, then you're a winner, because you will get that resistance from family. You'll hear even your close friends saying all this craziness. But if you maintain that pace and you roll with the punches, right, you'll realize that you can go very far. Everyone who says all these crazy things, they'll get filtered out, and then you'll start making new friends, and then you'll start widening that bracket of people, even if it's your neighbors or whatever it is. You start widening that, because there's no way you can live your life in Zimbabwe like how we are in the diaspora, where if you're going to be commuting, you put headphones on and it's just you and your phone. In Zimbabwe, it's rare you walk around with headphones. It doesn't work, because even in the combi, you're greeting people, you're talking to people. If you're going to the markets, you're talking to people. It's like you're constantly talking to people. Sometimes you may not even want to talk to people, but it just happens. So the vibe is different. So this is why I'm saying, if you're able to maintain that and just start building slowly, this could be the beginning of trying to set up your retirement plan. And like I always say, yes, I know people have their own ideas and they've come up with their own decisions. I'm not saying everyone should do what I'm doing. I'm not preaching to you. I'm just talking about my experiences and what I've seen. And also another thing that I also want to mention is dying in the diaspora is very expensive. It's very, very expensive, because in the end, you're going to leave your children or your community with massive debt. In the end, you might need to start raising money through GoFundMe, because it can't be buried here. Or at least maybe the body has to be flown back to Zimbabwe. And that's not cheap. It's very, very expensive. So it is very tough. And if you want to plan your move from the UK to the diaspora, we have a community called Kumusha Investors. Just being part of that community is fantastic, because it's a community of like-minded people. You can get ideas, or even be part of the projects that we are trying to build, which are in farming and also in real estate. So you can literally be a part of that journey and invest while you're still working here in the diaspora. This is a system that is built on trust and transparency. So take a look at that. The link to that is in the video description below. Just being part of that is a really, really good thing, because it can be lonely in the diaspora as well, because all we do most of the time here is work, and we have no time to speak to people or hang out with people, So go ahead, link to that is in the video description below. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you again in the next one. Take care.